so hello and welcome to the 10th day of 2 weeks of Thomas Hardy, and today I'm going to be talking about The Return of the Native. Chapter 1. A face on which time makes but little impression. A Saturday afternoon in November was approaching the time of twilight, and the vast tract of unenclosed wild known as Egdon Heath embrowned itself moment by moment. Overhead, the hollow stretch of whitish cloud shutting out the sky was as a tent which had the whole heath for its floor. So The Return of the Native was published in 1878, and it is my fifth favourite Thomas Hardy novel. I'm very fond of this one. I think it is an absolutely brilliant novel, and I would highly recommend it. Before I go on to talk about the things I like and don't like about this book, I quickly want to talk about what the basic plot is. The Return of the Native is set around this wonderful landscape of Egdon Heath, this huge, massive, open, wide, wild landscape, and the book mainly deals with four central characters who all live in and around this area. So the title character, the native of the land who returns at the beginning of the book, is Clem Yearbright. He is a young man who has come back into the neighbourhood after many years away. We also have his cousin Thomasin, or possibly Tamsin Yearbright. Different characters pronounce it in different ways. We also have Eustacia Vi, who is a wonderful, fascinating character who lives alone with her grandfather in a really isolated area of the Heath, who is generally considered by many people to be a witch and has quite a dubious reputation. We also have Damon Wildeve, who early on in the book elopes with Thomasin Yearbright, but we also discover has a bit of a history with Eustacia Vi. Along with these four characters, we have various other people who live in and around Egdon Heath, and we also have Diggory Venn, who is possibly my favourite character in all of Thomas Hardy. I love Diggory so much. He is the nicest character in all of Thomas Hardy. He is a wonderful, fascinating man. He has been in love with Thomasin for many years, and even though he knows that she does not return his affection, he will always, forever, try his absolute best to help her and make her life better, and I think he's a wonderful, glorious character and like the best romantic hero ever, because he is awesome. Anyway, the book basically deals with the intermingling, complicated relationships between these four central characters, between Clem Yearbright, his cousin Thomasin, Eustacia Vi, and Damon Wildeve, and the romantic entanglements between these couples are very complicated. Clem has known his cousin Thomasin all his life and is very fond of her, but he falls madly in love with Eustacia Vi, who he's completely enchanted by. Unknown to him, Eustacia has all this complication and all this messy backstory and love with Damon Wildeve, who is now with Thomasin, and it's just all a big mess of a little love square / love pentagon with Diggory on the end. It's very hard for me to explain more about the story than that without spoiling it, because it is so complicated and the book shifts so much over the course of it. It's a wonderful story, really well done, really complicated, really dark and bleak, really tragic and beautiful, and it has that Hardy thing which I will try to explain so many times and just can't, but this book has it in heaps. It is a wonderful book, really brilliant, beautiful, so well written, so fascinating. Things that I love about it more specifically, one is just the characters. I think it has some wonderful characters. Eustacia Vi is a brilliant character, absolutely fascinating. The book is especially interesting in the way that it explores Eustacia's loneliness and the way that she longs for companions and the way that makes her behave. She's also very cunning and very clever and does a lot of interesting things. Like, there's one brilliant scene in this book where she really wants to be part of this like amateur dramatics thing that's going on, so she pays off one of the lads that works for her grandfather, steals his costume and goes there pretending to be his replacement and pretending to be a man so that she can act in this amateur dramatics, and I just think like little details like that of this book are so really very interesting. The five main characters, if you include Diggory Venn as a central character, are absolutely fascinating, and the very complicated relationships between them are very good. Damon Wildeve is a really interesting character in that he's not nice, but he is kind of still sympathetic, and even though at sometimes he's horrible and does like really nasty things, he isn't completely evil, and I think that is done very well. I also think Thomasin is a really interesting character, and the way she contrasts with Eustacia, and their very different personalities are great, and Clem Yearbright, who is an extent the hero of the story, is very interesting as well, and the way he feels about Eustacia and the way he also feels about his cousin Thomasin is very interestingly developed. The thing I love about Hardy most, the thing that most draws me to Hardy, is not his nature writing, it's not his landscapes, as I know it is for many people. It is the way he characterises and writes about human relationships, because I think he does it brilliantly, and he does it brilliantly, so brilliantly here. And of course Diggory Venn, who, as I said, is possibly my favourite Hardy character. Like, obviously this isn't my favourite Hardy novel, but I think in terms of his characters, the one I love the most and the one I like want to be friends with is Diggory Venn. I can kind of understand why Thomasin doesn't love him, or why Thomasin is much more drawn to Damon than him, but at the same time, like, he is such a powerful and interesting character, and the love he feels for her and the way it makes him act and his complete selflessness is wonderful and makes me very, very happy. I also love the landscape of Egdon Heath. I think it is a brilliant, wild, empty landscape. But more than the actual landscape, what I love is the way that Hardy writes about how these characters are influenced and how their lives are changed by the fact that they live in this really isolated place, especially someone like Estacia Vi, who many people think is a witch and who is very, very lonely and lives very, very remotely. The way that Hardy looks at how this landscape affects people's personalities and affects people's beliefs is really, really brilliant. More than loving the way Hardy writes about landscape, I love the way that Hardy writes about how landscape affects people. In this book, in The Woodlanders, and also in The Well-Beloved, even though The Well-Beloved is my least favourite Hardy novel, in those two books I think he looks very, very interestingly at how unusual landscapes affect a community, and I really, really like that. It's so good in The Return of the Native, and Egdon Heath is such a brilliant location. I also just adore the plot of the book. It's done so perfectly, so well. I can't see how the plot could be improved. Like, in a way, a bit like The Mayor of Casterbridge, it's perfect as the book it is. I also love the ending. There are a few different separate things I love about the ending. One, it is one of those Hardy endings that is heartbreaking and will make you cry, but even like the happy bits of the ending are tinged with sadness, and a bit like in the way I've spoken about before, how Under the Greenwood Tree or Far from the Madding Crowd, you get to the end and you're like, well, this bit's happy, and then you're like, oh wait. I love it when Hardy does that. I think it's so powerful and in many ways so true to life. I love the scope and the breadth of this book. I love so many of the themes. I love the way that it looks at loneliness and isolation, the way that it looks at home versus abroad. One of the great conflicts between Clem and Eustasia is that Clem has been abroad for all these years, yet he has come back to Egdon Heath to live there because he loves this place, because it's his home, whereas Eustacia really, really wants to leave. She is drawn to Clem because he has been abroad for so long, but actually being abroad and all of this life that he has led in other places is not what he wants. Conflict between this isolated home and the possibility of other things is really, really strongly looked at in this. As many Hardy novels do, The Return of the Native looks very interestingly at reputation and at romance. It also looks very interestingly at marriage and family and so many things. It is such a brilliant book. I also really love the descriptions of this part of the countryside and everyone's different jobs, especially Diggory Venn. I know I keep on talking about him. Diggory Venn is what I think is called a reddleman. So what he did was he specialised in travelling around the country selling red chalk that people would use to mark up sheep, which means because he works with this chalk all the time, he is constantly red, like he is stained red, like his skin is stained a bright red, which is such a interesting, fascinating bit of rural history in the 19th century that I didn't know about. But I genuinely can't think of anything I don't like about The Return of the Native. Like, I know it's my 5th favourite, but all of my top favourite Hardy novels are such brilliant, perfect, incredible books. I don't have anything to fault it on. I love it so much. Just talking about it in this video has made me remember how much I adore The Return of the Native. So that is basically all I wanted to say about The Return of the Native. Please let me know down in the comments if you've read this and what you thought of it. It's definitely a Hardy that I would very, very strongly recommend. It's a brilliant, brilliant book, a great place to start, great place to go on with. It's just a wonderful, wonderful Hardy novel. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk about another Hardy book.